The jungle does not give up its secrets easily. For centuries, it has been a green, breathing monster, swallowing empires whole and leaving behind only whispers. In our collective imagination, the story is always the same. A rugged explorer, machete in hand, hacks through a suffocating curtain of vines. Sweat stings his eyes. The air is thick with the buzz of insects and the calls of unseen creatures. And then he sees it. A stone pyramid, draped in moss and roots, rising from the forest floor like the ghost of a forgotten world. A lost city, the home of the Maya. This image is powerful, and it comes with its own mythology. A mythology of curses whispered on the wind, of tombs rigged with ancient booby traps, of vengeful spirits guarding golden idols. We are fascinated by the idea of a civilization so advanced, so mysterious, that it could simply vanish, leaving behind silent, stone sentinels in a jungle that reclaimed its own. We ask ourselves, what curse could have been so powerful as to fell an empire of astronomers, mathematicians, and architects? What ancient evil stalked these plazas and ball courts? But the truth, as it so often is far more complex, far more terrifying, and far more relevant to our own world than any Hollywood curse. The real curse of the Maya was not a supernatural force. It was something they built with their own hands, a brilliant but brittle trap of their own making. Recent discoveries, made not with a machete but with beams of light fired from the sky, have allowed us to strip back the jungle and see this lost world as it truly was for the first time. And what we have found is the story of the true curse of the Maya. This is what they found. Before we venture deeper into the heart of this mystery, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. Our goal is to uncover the real stories buried by time, and your support makes that mission possible. Please share your own theories and questions in the comments below. Every great discovery begins with a question. Now, let's peel back the jungle canopy and look upon the ghost of an empire. For decades, our understanding of the ancient Maya was built on what we could see on the ground. Archaeologists would painstakingly map the great ceremonial centers that poked through the jungle canopy. Tikal with its towering temples, the intricate carvings of Palenque, the vast expanse of Calakmul. Based on this evidence, a picture emerged of a civilization of relatively small, independent city-states. They were seen as priest-kings ruling over modest populations of farmers, who lived in a kind of mystical harmony with the surrounding jungle. Their cities were primarily ceremonial hubs, largely empty except for festival days. The collapse, when it came, was a profound mystery. How could a people so attuned to nature simply disappear? This entire picture was shattered in the last decade. The game-changing technology is called LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. In essence, an aircraft flies over the jungle, firing billions of laser pulses toward the ground. These pulses pass through the leaves and branches, bounce off whatever lies beneath, and return to a sensor. By measuring the return time of each pulse, a supercomputer can digitally erase the jungle, revealing a stunningly detailed 3D map of the bare earth below. For Maya archaeology, it was like turning on the lights in a dark room for the first time. The results were breathtaking. Where we once saw a few scattered cities, LiDAR revealed thousands of previously unknown structures. We saw not just pyramids and palaces, but a vast, sprawling suburban landscape of houses, workshops, and defensive walls. The populations were not small, they were immense. Estimates for the Maya lowlands now range from 7 to 11 million people at their peak, a density comparable to modern-day Europe. These were not sleepy ceremonial centers. They were bustling, crowded megalopolises, some of the largest urban zones on Earth at the time. But the most staggering revelation was not the cities themselves, but the land between them. The LiDAR scans showed that almost every square inch of available land had been engineered. The pristine jungle that archaeologists had trudged through for a century was a complete illusion. It was, in fact, the overgrown ghost of a colossal garden. We could see vast networks of agricultural terraces climbing the hillsides. We saw intricate grids of canals and drainage ditches crisscrossing the low-lying wetlands, or bajos. This was a system designed to capture and manage water with breathtaking precision, allowing for intensive farming on a scale previously thought impossible. The Maya were not living in the jungle, they had subjugated it. They had transformed a hostile environment into an imperial breadbasket. Furthermore, LiDAR uncovered a web of causeways known as sakbiab, or white ways. These were raised stone highways, some stretching for dozens of miles, connecting cities in a great interconnected network. This wasn't a loose collection of city-states. It was a deeply integrated civilization, bound by trade, politics, and, as we would soon learn, by unrelenting, brutal warfare. The LiDAR maps revealed defensive structures everywhere: citadels, fortress walls, moats. The romantic image of peaceful astronomer priests evaporated. This was a civilization locked in a perpetual, high-stakes struggle for power and resources. This new, astonishing picture of the Maya is the first key to understanding their true curse. They were not victims of the jungle, they were its masters. They were a civilization that, through sheer ingenuity, had built a world far beyond what their environment should have been able to support. They had created a gilded cage. Their success was predicated on a system of total environmental control, a system that was brilliant, complex, and, as it turned out, catastrophically fragile. The curse of the Maya was their own success. Let's dissect this gilded cage. Its foundation was water. The Yucatan Peninsula has a challenging climate. It is a karst landscape, meaning the ground is porous limestone with almost no surface rivers. For half the year, during the rainy season, water is abundant. For the other half, the dry season, it is gone. To support millions of people, the Maya had to become masters of water management. Every city was, in essence, a giant water capturing machine. They paved their vast central plazas with stucco, sloping them gently to channel every drop of precious rainfall into enormous, man-made reservoirs. Tikal, one of the greatest Maya cities, had a system of reservoirs that could hold millions of gallons of water, enough to sustain its population of over 60,000 people through the dry season. They built canals to manage the swampy lowlands, creating raised fields that were fertile year-round. This system was the bedrock of their civilization. It allowed them to feed their massive population and build their incredible cities. But it had a fatal flaw. It was entirely dependent on a predictable pattern of seasonal rain. If the rains failed, the system would collapse. The second bar of this cage was their political and social structure. At the top of each city-state was the Kayuhul Ajo, the Holy Lord or Divine King. This was no mere political leader. The king was seen as a divine being, a conduit between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. His most sacred duty was to perform the rituals that guaranteed cosmic order. He was the rainmaker. His bloodletting ceremonies, where he would pierce his own body to offer his sacred blood to the gods, were believed to appease the deities and ensure the rains would come, the crops would grow, and the city would prosper. The monumental pyramids they built were stages for these rituals, giant billboards broadcasting the king's power to mediate with the supernatural. This system worked magnificently when times were good. A strong harvest and victory in battle were proof of the king's divine favor. But it was an incredibly risky bargain. The king's legitimacy was not based on consent of the governed, but on his perceived ability to control the uncontrollable. If the rains failed, it was not an unfortunate weather pattern. It was a personal failure of the king. It meant his rituals were ineffective, his connection to the gods was broken, or worse, that the gods had abandoned him and his people. The third bar of the cage, as LiDAR has now made brutally clear, was endemic warfare. The old idea of ritualistic, small-scale conflicts has been replaced by the reality of total war. Maya cities were heavily fortified. Inscriptions and art depict brutal battles, the capture and ritual sacrifice of rival kings, and the subjugation of entire cities. This was not warfare for glory alone. It was a zero-sum game for control of the most valuable resources, fertile land, trade routes, and most importantly, people for labor and sacrifice. In a landscape where every resource was stretched to its limit, the success of one city often meant the decline of another. This constant state of conflict created a deeply unstable political landscape. A drought or a poor harvest wouldn't just mean hunger. It would be seen as a sign of weakness, an invitation for a rival city to attack. So we have the complete picture. A civilization of millions, sustained by a fragile, man-made water system, ruled by divine kings whose power depended on their ability to make it rain, and locked in a state of perpetual, resource-driven warfare. This was the Maya world at its peak in the 8th century AD, during what we call the Classic period. It was a masterpiece of human ingenuity, and it was a house of cards waiting for a gust of wind. That wind was about to blow. Beginning around the year 820 AD, something began to go terribly wrong. We can see it in the archaeological record. The Maya, who were obsessive record keepers, began to erect fewer and fewer stone monuments. Grand construction projects in the major cities of the southern lowlands ground to a halt. The last dated monument at the great city of Bonampak is from 800 AD. At Tikal, it's 869 AD. After that, the historical record, written in stone, goes silent. For over a century, archaeologists called this the Maya collapse, a profound mystery. Now, thanks to the work of paleoclimatologists, we know what happened. The sky, the source of all life, fell silent. By studying sediment cores from lakes and mineral formations in caves, scientists have been able to reconstruct the climate of the past with incredible precision. And they found that the period between roughly 800 and 950 AD, the exact window of the terminal classic collapse, was marked by a series of prolonged and severe droughts. These were not just a few dry years. This was a century-long megadrought, punctuated by several episodes of extreme aridity, some lasting for decades. For the Maya civilization, built entirely on the promise of seasonal rain, this was an apocalyptic shock. The carefully engineered system began to break down. The reservoirs, for the first time in centuries, began to dry up and stay dry. The once fertile fields withered under a relentless sun. Crop yields plummeted. What began as a food shortage spiraled into a catastrophic famine. Now, imagine the domino effect this had on their society. The first domino to fall was faith. The Kayuhul-Ajo, the divine king, went to the top of his pyramid. He performed the ancient rituals. He spilled his sacred blood. He prayed to Chak, the rain god. And nothing happened. The sky remained stubbornly clear. For his people starving and desperate, the conclusion was inescapable. The king was a fraud. The gods were deaf. The cosmic covenant was broken. The authority of the ruling class, the very glue holding their society together, dissolved. The second domino was political stability. As the king's authority crumbled, social order frayed. And in a landscape already primed for conflict, desperation fueled the flames of war. The fighting became more intense, more brutal. It was no longer about capturing nobles for a glorious sacrifice. It was a desperate, scorched-earth struggle for the last remaining pockets of water and food. Archaeological evidence from this period shows cities being violently destroyed, their monuments deliberately defaced, a clear sign of rebellion or conquest. This escalating warfare only made the crisis worse. It disrupted the remaining trade routes, prevented farmers from tending their fields, and turned the Maya world into a landscape of fear. The final domino was abandonment. The great cities, which had once been the centers of power, religion, and life, became death traps. They were places of famine, disease, and war. The system had failed. So the people did the only logical thing they could do. They voted with their feet. In one of the great demographic shifts of human history, they simply walked away. They abandoned the monumental centers, the empty reservoirs, and the powerless kings. They melted back into the jungle, breaking into smaller, more sustainable groups, seeking out the few remaining water sources, like the deep cenotes, the natural sinkholes that dotted the northern Yucatan. This, then, is the answer to the mystery. The Maya did not vanish. They did not get abducted by aliens or ascend to a higher plane. Their civilization, in the southern lowlands, underwent a catastrophic systemic collapse. The true curse was not a mummy's hex. It was the lethal interaction between a changing climate and a social and political system that was too rigid to adapt. Their incredible success at engineering their environment had allowed their population to grow to unsustainable levels. Their political system, based on divine kingship, was brittle and could not withstand the crisis of faith that followed the drought. And their history of endemic warfare ensured that, when the crisis hit, they turned on each other rather than working together. The gilded cage they had so brilliantly constructed became their tomb. So what lessons can we draw from this ghost of an empire? The story of the Maya collapse is a chillingly relevant cautionary tale. It is a story about what can happen when a complex society pushes its environment to the absolute limit, creating a system so optimized for one set of conditions that it cannot survive when those conditions change. It is a story about the danger of placing unwavering faith in leaders and ideologies that promise to control the forces of nature, and the social chaos that ensues when those promises are inevitably broken. The Maya were not a primitive people who failed. They were a brilliant, sophisticated civilization that succeeded too well. They pushed their world to the breaking point, and the breaking point arrived. Today, as our own global civilization faces its own set of environmental pressures, resource scarcities, and political fragilities, the silent stones of Tikal and Calakmul have never spoken more loudly. They are not a mystery to be solved, but a warning to be heeded. The whispers in the jungle are not the curses of ancient spirits. They are the echoes of our own possible future. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. The story of the Maya is a powerful reminder that history is not just about the past, it is a mirror. If you found this journey insightful, please support our channel by liking and subscribing. And let us know your thoughts below. What echoes of the Maya do you see in the world today? Until next time, listen to the past. It has much to teach us.